Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has now said that the Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal is expected to begin as originally scheduled after hours of uncertainty over the timing of the final cabinet approval of the deal. As per the statement, the pending approval by the Security Cabinet and the government and the agreement taking effect, the release of the hostages will be implemented according to the planned framework in which the hostages are expected to be released on Sunday. Now, during a 42-day first phase, Hamas will release 33 hostages and Israel will release between 900 and 1,650 Palestinian detainees, including all of those detained since 7th of October 2023. How is the Middle East going to look like once the war ends? And more importantly, the lives of a number of hostages who are still alive and in the capture of Hamas will be saved now that the deal has come through. Let's start our conversation. Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador Basuti Mukherjee. And Ambassador Mukherjee, how do you view this deal that has finally been struck from the aspect of the number of people, the families, the relatives, the friends who had been uncertain about when their family members are going to be released? Several of them have been in fact dead. There is at this point of time no indication of how many people are still with Hamas in their capture. The fact that there is going to be finally a sigh of relief that the hostages are going to be released, they are going to go home after almost a year.
I think, Megha, this is a time for great celebration in Israel that the 33 hostages are being released. Many of them women, I'm told. Let's not forget the horrific way in which they were kidnapped, the women were raped, assaulted. We don't know in what conditions they've been kept for so long, but I am informed by my friends in the armed forces, and I'm sure General Kocher would have more to say on that, that when you are in such a situation for a long time, it has a permanent imprint on your mental health, and it can take you months to recover from such a terrible experience. We don't know that when they were in captivity, was violence perpetrated, particularly on the women? Were they kept in tunnels? Were they kept in darkness? What kind of human rights violations were inflicted upon them, etc.? So, from every perspective, and I see daily these clippings of these poor families begging Netanyahu and his government to do something to release their loved ones. So, I think from their perspective, I very much rejoice. Similarly, I am very happy that a large number of Palestinians are going back home. I hope that this release would result in a new atmosphere of understanding of each other, even though it looks very difficult right now. A shared recognition that this land belongs to both, and that if they want to live, they have to live in peace and harmony with each other. There is no other solution to the present impasse between Israel and the Palestinians. Both have to understand that they are there to stay. Geography cannot be changed. History cannot be changed. They have to learn to live with each other. I don't know whether in my generation, Megha, that will happen. But if there is to be any peace in this area, it has to be based on this understanding. And one step to this understanding is for Hamas to release these Israeli hostages, because we must not forget that it was Hamas who started this entire confrontation. And I really wonder whether Hamas, in its internal reflections, accepts now that what they did was a huge strategic error. Because despite the horrific revenge by Israel, the fact that Hamas started it is something that cannot be forgotten.
Okay.
And here, the sympathy is there, a huge amount of sympathy for what Israel and Israel's families had to go through because of that. Megha.
Dr. Vail, coming to you now, what are going to be the implications now that there is a possibility, a potential that the war is going to end? The Israeli government has said that they are going to withdraw all their troops from the Gaza Strip. How does this scenario in the Middle East look like? Do you think there is likelihood of normalization or at least a hint of it in the coming months?
Thank you, Mega. I think it's a truce. It's not a complete agreement that there will be no fighting, because what under tremendous pressure is facing Mr. Netanyahu because of the right-wing coalitions, that Smotrich, the finance minister, is making it very clearly that he wants a guarantee from Netanyahu that phase one of the deal should be completed, and then Israel go back into the Gaza and complete the job of a victory and the eliminating of Hamas. And I think Netanyahu understands very well that he will not be able to violate this deal, because the United States, especially President Trump, who had for the first time, he had his special envoy, Steve, among the negotiators on the table, along with Biden administration envoys and Saudis, the Qataris, and the Israelis. And I think all these have given a very strong assurances that this truce will continue till the 62 days, and Israel will definitely withdraw because of two reasons. A, that the Trump administration made it very clear that and gave the ultimatum to Netanyahu to finish before he takes office, and he forced him to do so. And in fact, that's why most of the Israeli media says that it was forced on Netanyahu and it's a victory for Hamas. So this is one of the issues. The second issue, which is more important, that what Netanyahu is trying to woo his coalition partners by telling them that you can have the free hand of resettlement, increase the settlement in West Bank, because President Trump, when he joined office, he will recognize West Bank as a part of eternal Israel. So these are the issues are on the table, and Israel definitely will leave Gaza Strip for the moment, because they have realized that they were unable to kick 2 million people out of Gaza, though they have killed and injured more than 150,000 and 100% internally displaced the total Palestinian, and 85% of the infrastructure is totally destroyed. But still, the Palestinians were not willing to leave their country. So therefore, I think what we are going to witness a second phase of Israeli project in the region. They will take on West Bank.
Particularly, the situation here where there is the Biden administration who's trying to take credit of the ceasefire that at this point of time is going to happen between both the sides. There's a Trump administration who's also speaking about how it has been a significant negotiator in the deal. What does the picture look like when Trump comes to power?
Well, I think one of the statements that was made by somebody senior in the Republican Party is that the truce of the ceasefire, whatever you call it, is it's tenable till the time Hamas does not make this next attack. So I at the same time, if you look at it, it is highly unlikely that there will be any permanent truce or a permanent ceasefire, because then it is almost akin to Hamas declaring that they literally recognize the state of Israel. And at the same time, I think there are hawks within Israel as well, who would not want, the way things are as it is. They would want for something, you may call it a permanent solution. So there are hawks on both sides, but at the same time, I don't want to, create an equivalence between the two entities, because Israel at the end of the day is a state, and it is a responsible state. It has an economy to run. So they have invested, they have spent a lot of money on this war, and now they have to resurrect the economy. But we have to understand that Israel is a country of resettlers. Israel is a country of resettlers, and if a perpetual conflict continues, many would think of exiting that place. So they have to take care of the economy. But at the same time, Hamas, I don't think beyond a point Hamas ever wanted to create a model state out of Gaza. They had enough opportunities. So I think the conflict will come back to the table, probably only it's a matter of few months, maybe a year. And at the same time, if you look at Trump's policy, there is a Middle East policy they have in mind. There are reasons for which even Trump has been okay with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham coming to power in Syria. And I think they will play the proxy in terms of waging the war on Lebanon and Iran. So there are a lot of resettlement, there are a lot of reset of the maps in Middle East that's going to happen. So potential possibility of peace coming to Middle East, I think that's a futile expectation. It's just a momentary pause.
Okay, Major General Rajan Kochar, as as well, Avadh was saying that there has been quite the turmoil that Netanyahu has been facing within his cabinet, as well as the opposition that he has been facing, that has been demanding from the government when the hostages are going to return. Just now, there has been a statement that has been released by the National Security Minister of Netanyahu saying that he is going to quit if the hostage deal is completed. How is Netanyahu going to deal with these domestic issues, domestic rebellion within his party, as well as wanting to ensure that he continues to remain Prime Minister of the country?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because Netanyahu has to do a bit of tightrope walking right now because his internal political machinery is at variance to this deal, and he has got less than 48 hours left. And I believe after about an hour or so, there's going to be a meeting of the security cabinet because that'll be the first step. Because he'll have to take approval of the security cabinet, and then he'll have to go to his cabinet ministers for the approval. Already, three ministers have expressed a disassociation on this decision. The problem areas which are actually coming, which will need to be fine-tuned in this discussion. One point is about the Philadelphia corridor, which is approximately 14 kilometers. If you remember, Israel Defense Forces had discovered tunneling from Gaza into Egypt. And most of the weapons and ammunition were being smuggled from these areas. So one of the bone of contention is going to be that can a similar situation develop for Israel if Philadelphia corridor is not monitored by the IDF. So that would be one point on the table, I think. The second point on the table would be that do we agree to all the three phases of the ceasefire? Because right now, it's extremely important that the phase 1 gets through, and phase 2 and phase 3 may not be in consonance with the opinion of the other members of the cabinet. So, does Netanyahu have the mandate to only accept phase 1 of the ceasefire and not accept phase 2 and phase 3?
Okay.
Because it does not seem so, because as far as this agreement is concerned, he has done the agreement for all the three phases because it's a package. So he has accepted this. So most importantly, I feel that for the time being, this ceasefire will be prevailed upon. It will be accepted. And on the 20th of January, when Trump comes into place, I think further fine tuning of the phase 2 and phase 3 can also take place. You see, it's not a red line has been drawn right now.
You know, any party could decide to then not fulfill the promise, and that's where the problem lies. Now, Ambassador Mukherjee, again, the question: what is the guarantee that Israel, fulfills its promise of the three-phase deal that it has now signed with Hamas? And the same question for Hamas.
Hamas has agreed in toto to the full deal, and so has Netanyahu. Netanyahu does not have the comfort level of going through one phase and then backing off on phase 2 and 3. What could happen at the cabinet meeting, which is going to be held, as General Kocher says, 1 hour from now, is that he could face a cabinet revolt and his government could collapse. That could happen. In which case there would be no deal because there would be a caretaker government. You cannot rule that out. You cannot rule out that his government will collapse between phase 1 and phase 2. Because for Netanyahu, his continuation depended on the continuation of the war. That is the irony of the entire situation. Once there is peace and there are general elections in Israel, the possibility is that he may lose those elections. So now, in the peace deal itself, he may lose power. So he is under tremendous pressure from both sides, from the Americans and the Qataris negotiators, that the Hamas has signed on to 3, he has signed on to 3. Then in the peace deal, signed, sealed and signed, you can't do phase 1 and back off as a responsible state. You have to go through, unless your government collapses. In my opinion, his government will not collapse. There are some extremists, extreme rightists who are threatened to quit, and they will quit after this government. But if the moderates support him outside, he would be able to go through with the deal. And I do believe that it is extremely provocative also of Iran to call this deal as surrender of Israel. These are the kind of provocative statements that actually make the situation far more difficult for any Israeli prime minister to go through phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 of the deal. But he will have to go through with it because, as my co-panelists have said, Israel needs the peace also for its economic reconstruction. And Gaza desperately needs the peace to rebuild.
Okay, so. All right. Dr. Vela, but an important question comes to mind, that it's been months together that there were negotiation talks that were happening, but they were just falling apart. So what has happened in the last 1 week? There was the Mossad director who was sent to Qatar. There were United States and other European allies envoys who were also in Qatar. There was the Hamas representatives who arrived in Qatar as well. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they were all part of the negotiations. So what has happened in the last 1 week that allowed for this deal to happen?
Well, let me put it on the records, as the American president said it yesterday, day before yesterday, that actually the same deal was put on the table in May and in June that was about to be implemented when Netanyahu pulls out because of the internal pressure from his partners, or also because of his ego personality that he wanted to continue and wanted to achieve his aim of eliminating Hamas, destroying the infrastructure of Hamas and liberating the prisoners from Hamas, and also to ensure that the security of Israel has been achieved. In all the front he has failed, and we have noticed that the total destruction of Gaza Strip have already exposed Israel intention of killing and indiscriminately killing children and women, and most of their death are elderly women and children. And we know that more than 12,000 children have been killed and more than 14,000 still buried underground, nobody unknown for them. So American government also is losing its reputation internationally because it's blindly supporting Netanyahu plan. So before the election, Netanyahu had a deal with Trump, for which Trump told him that you should finish the war before I take office, and he promised him that, provided that, as I said, Trump will be giving a West Bank as a gift for Israel as a part of Israel. There's no question of a Palestinian state. So all these things happen, Megha, and now Netanyahu is facing the music inside because of the trial against him by the court, because of some of the criminal cases against him, some of the corruption cases against him. His political career will end, as Ambassador Mukherjee said, if they go for an early election. And I think these are the issues we have to keep on consideration. And let me say finally, we should not see the development in Gaza Strip in isolation to what is happening around in West Asia. It's Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Jordan, and the fallout of taking over Syria by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
Yeah, absolutely. Pratikrit, I'm going to come to you. And again, a lot of pressure was building on the Netanyahu government because citizens of Israel, the family members, the relatives, they were putting a lot of pressure. They were upset, frustrated that it has been so many months. Their family members, the hostages have still not returned. And it was a position that had to be taken. As Dr. Velavat said, that there was a decision that needed to be taken. It could not be stalled any longer. Do you think there has been immense pressure from the people of Israel, from the family members particularly?
Megha, for any leader, when a war starts, it is always very difficult to contain the dissatisfaction. Whether Israel was right or wrong, it's another issue, but it was almost fighting a three-frontal war against the Houthis, against the Hezbollah and the Hamas, and these are all proxies of Iran. We all know that. So at the same time, if Netanyahu had given up midway, and if the attacks would have continued, if another October 7 would have happened, then invariably people of Israel would have blamed the political establishment. So it is always a catch-22 situation. Of course, those families who have their hostages with the Hamas, it is very difficult for them to wait. But at the same time, there is another thing. In this relationship between United States and Israel, there is no denial of the fact that the Americans have supported Netanyahu for whatever he did. But at the same time, I think Americans want to make it very clear to Israel that America will have the last word always as to when to pull the string and end the war. So it has been made very clear to Netanyahu that it cannot go on, that for its own political survival, he will continue with the war. And as it is, if you look at Middle East today, I think the priority of Trump also will not be Gaza, but will be Iran. Whether it's right or wrong, it's another issue. So I don't think he was any more interested to do any more to Gaza. You can't kill 2 million people. You have already destroyed what you had to destroy.
Yeah.
What is left is there. So invariably this was inevitable, but whether it will last or long, that is another issue.
Okay, I'm going to come back to General Kocher. Your analysis, what is it that you predict when it comes to normalization of ties? An effort is again going to be started off, because right at the time that Israel was wanting to normalize ties, and there were talks that were happening with Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Egypt and other nations, at the very same time his Hamas struck. How soon can the resumption of these talks now happen?
Interesting question, Megha, because I feel that after Trump comes in, he may try to revive the Abraham Accord, because that should be the first step in carrying out normalization in this region. And I think for that, Saudi Arabia is going to, and UAE are the two key players, I think, who are going to play a very, very significant role with regard to the two-state solution. Because see, ultimately we have to understand that the Palestinians and the Jews, that is the Israelis, have to coexist with each other. So they cannot be a situation where you tell the Palestinians to move out, or you tell the Israelis to consider the demands of the Palestinians. So it has to be somewhere in between situation where certain compromises from both sides will have to be made. And I think Trump is going to play a very, very key role in bringing these two parties together, because what I understand is all his advisors and everybody, and what kind of discussions which are happening in the US is on these lines, that they are trying over a period of time to bring about a reconciliation formula. And the first step is to normalize things in Gaza, because everything has to be stepwise. And I don't think that a West Bank will be given to the Israelis and things like that. That won't be possible. So possibly if we look at the earlier accords, Camp David Accord and things like that, we may be able to sort of juggle up some kind of a formula which is acceptable to both the sides. And my last point is that in case nothing like that happens, I don't think there'll be any peace in the Middle East. It's a temporary ceasefire. It may last 6 months, 1 year. We will find again this thing started. But one thing in favor of Israel is Israel has wiped off the top leadership of Hamas. All the logistic routes which were to come from Syria and Hezbollah have been weakened.
Okay.
So to that extent, Hamas will take some time to regroup.
Okay, all right. On that note, I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast.